Hey everyone, welcome back to another painting tutorial. As always, my name is Jay, and in this video I'll be showing you how I painted this Deathguard Poxwalker, one of the really cool new models for the starter set for Warhammer 40k 8th edition. So I started off by priming the model gray. Actually I did black, and then from a 45-degree angle, gray. I really wanted to establish some really heavy shadowing prior to starting to paint. That way it's all nice and pre-shaded. And then I did two coats, a very thin Troll Slayer orange. As you can see, it's a little thinner than I normally do. I thin down all my GW paints lamium medium. That way they're all nice and thin, they go all nice and that's really what I want to go on. I don't want to go in too clumpy. So you can see I just quickly painted up a couple thin coats of Troll Slayer orange. I really wanted his, what I really like about this model is the combination of like oranges, like the his jail suit versus the flesh. So then I did a quick highlight as well with Troll Slayer Orange and Screaming Skull. Reason why I pre-highlighted up is I wanted to then hit it with a watered down Agrax Earthshade, which will get in the recesses and give it that really dirty, danky feel, which is what I wanted for this model. I don't want it to be nice and clean for the clothing. I want it to be a little bit dirtier, and Agrax Earthshade is obviously the best one to do because it's liquid talent in a bottle, right? So when that was all done, I then started on all the flesh areas of the model. As you can see, I put a little bit on the face as well because there's a little bit showing underneath the mask with RATSKIN flesh. And yeah, so once again, the key is for this step is nice thin coats that will go on nicely, and you don't want to get too clumpy. I'm going to be doing several flesh tones over the model. So then, of course, next after that was dried, I went up to my BESTIGOR flesh as I normally do for flesh tones, and of course I'm going to incorporate some Nurgling's rot, you know, and some rotting flesh into this tutorial, of course, because that's the way of Nurgle and these Poxwalkers. And when that was dry, I then hit it with a straight up flesh shade. I usually thin it down slightly, but I went straight out of the pot for this one because I really wanted to animate the rotteny flesh of this model. It's a really cool sculpt, and I want to just really make it as stark contrast as possible. So to bring out this detail, I hit it with a pretty strong, actually, Reikland flesh shade. And then when that was dry, I then did a highlight with BESTIGOR flesh and UNGOR flesh, just picking up on the raised surfaces of the arms and the body. That way I can keep the shade in the recesses and really keep it as strong of a contrast as possible. And yeah, so that was good. And I just took my time and built up the raised surfaces all over the model. As you can see, the key is just take your time and build up these surfaces. As you can see, there's a lot of detail, and this model is really cool. And then I started adding Nurgling green into the mix. So I started slowly transforming from flesh tones to rotting, like disgusting, pussy tones. And I just added a little more at a time and building up in certain areas. And for the key for this step is don't make it uniform. Build up in certain areas in darker tones than others. Make sure it's uneven, because that would be the more realistic way. And I started putting over all the pustules and everything on the model. As you can see here, just building up certain areas, more green and green as I kept going. So then I added a little bit more Nurgling green into the mix. Of course I used a wet palette, so it kept this thing going. And then kept building up the areas thusly. As you can see, just picking up certain points and making it look as Nurgly rot as possible. But just making it look like the flesh is a continuous spectrum of rotting. And then continuing with this effect, and then adding a little more Nurgling green into this, and continuing forth. And repeat the process, you can see, with all the pustules and everything. And we've slowly gotten some rotting going. I didn't do any blood, I wanted to go with more rotting flesh tones. You could have had a little bit of blood, or maybe Blood for the Blood God effect. That'd be cool too. And when that was all done, and the flesh tones, I was happy with the array of flesh tones. I then did all the gray areas or the black areas with gray liner. As always, it is a dark matte gray. I really love it because it does appear almost black in the recesses, but a dark matte gray total, and it's very nice and thin. It's from Reaper, and I love to use it. It goes over pretty much any color with ease. So I just took my time and worked my way around the boots, his gloves, his mask, and all the belts on the model as well. That way it's a very limited color scheme on his clothing because I want to keep it simplistic. I want to do more of the effects of the rotting flesh, for example, and a gradient for all the bones and you know, nurgling parts of him. He is Deathguard after all. And then I continued forth with all the belts, all his straps. Yep, everything with a gray liner. I love it. And then after this was done, I did do a little brief highlight by adding a little bit of white into it and just doing a quick edge highlight of certain areas, but that's okay. I didn't show it. And I, of course, did gray liner as well for his mask, covering up everything else except that flesh pocket in the very center of his face. And of course, I'll be blending in later his horns, the scales coming out of him with some colors as well. So then, while I was drying, I took LEADBELCHER, of course the dark silver from GW. I didn't thin this one down, I just went straight from the paint pot onto the model. It has great coverage, and yeah, it goes over everything with a relative ease. I really like this, and as you see, it'll start breaking up the pieces of the model that are yet to be painted. So I'll use it on all the metallic areas, the belt buckles, the tips of his boots, the edge of his mask, and his blade. Of course, with metallics, just take your time and get a nice solid coat. And yeah, pretty straightforward there. As you can see, the model's starting to really come along. I really love the fact that it's one of those things that, you know, with each step it brings more and more of the model to life. Especially since, you know, most of it was pylon orange because of his prison jumpsuit, basically. And then I took emerald green, but I mixed it with a little brown to make it like murky. Emerald green is from Reaper, and it's supposed to be metallic, but I muddied it up a little bit just to give it some, you know, a dirty property. And then, of course, because I wanted it to be more dirty, I added some Agrax Earthshade to my normal non-oil mix. So it was a 1-to-1 mix of non-oil and Agrax Earthshade and applied to all of these metallic areas I just painted. That way it gets them really muddy and dirty, and that's kind of what I'm going with. I didn't want to go bloody, I just wanted more rotten and dirty for this model. And then I did a quick, just a light dry brush with IRONBREAKER, just to pick up some surfaces and just give a little bit of shine and contrast to them. As you can see, over all these areas. And just give a little bit more shine and a little bit of contrast to that pipe for his tank as well. For the red areas, of course, started with MEPHISTO red, the dark red from Citadel, of course, and did that for the lenses, or his eyes really, and the handle of his blade, and all the tubing going from the tanks to his mask. I just want a little bit of contrast, so a nice red would be nice for this case. And then I hit them all with a CARROBURG Crimson shade just to get them all dark. I really wanted the darkness around the edges of the eyes, and then as well to bring out the life of the tubing. And then what I did was I just took a Wild Rider red, the brightest red, and I did a dot in the center of the eyes, and then I just did a quick line over brush on the tubing to bring it to life. For his teeth, of course, I used White Scar. I just took my time and did a quick edge highlight of them to bring the teeth to life. I found that I figured if I didn't do it in the end, but if you find you're like overpainting a little bit, feel free to then hit with a non-oil shade to water it down to get the recesses. And next I started on the spiky parts. So I started with BANEBLADE brown, and my goal was to blend them eventually into wherever I was going in kind of an opposite direction of a gradient. So for his mask, I started off first with BANEBLADE brown, and then I did a wet blend back with gray liner, just building it up and pulling it both ways, as you can see. Just going upwards with the with the gray liner and then downwards with the BANEBLADE brown to just get as nice of a blend as I can quickly while it was wet. I didn't add any medium or any retardant into it, so I just go quickly, and then I did the same thing with USHABTI bone. I wanted to do bright on the tip of the one coming from his helmet because it would be a blend from dark to light, and then on the other ones coming from his body, I wanted to go from dark at the tips to light at the bottom because it'll be blending in with the light flesh tones. So I did the same thing, working in the opposite direction for these parts, ultimately blending it in then with the with Nurgling's rod again, because I wanted to, the point of attachment, I wanted to be very rotten. So I did it with USHABTI bone, and then Screaming Skull, once again working very quickly and blending this while it was wet. I kind of did an equivalent, basically a 2-brush blend or a wet blend, and I'd say more 2-brush blend in this case. And then once I added some more Nurgling green into this mixture, and then kept going to blend it to the body, and that's it. Then here's what the model looks like when it's completely done. As you can see, it turned out really nicely. I love the way that the rotting flesh tones looked. I thought it looked a little more realistic. And he was a lot of fun to paint up. So much detail on these new models from GW. I love them, and I'll keep working on them for tutorials to come. So thank you very much for requesting this one, and I really hope you enjoyed this painting tutorial for the Deathguard Poxwalker. And definitely stay tuned for more painting tutorials. So as always, a huge thank you for watching my videos and supporting my channel. It means more than you can imagine. Stay tuned for more painting tutorials, and until next time, this is Jay saying, happy painting, everyone.